theory, several of them that all basically speak the same thing, which says that humans evolved as Homo sapiens because we have a bigger limbic area of our brain, which then connects us in community, and we survive, climate change and predator attacks and so forth because we hung together in community, as opposed to some of the other hominids who have larger frontal cortices, and they were smarter, but they didn't hang together in tribes, and so they failed to evolve. So goes the theory, and it's sounding like the alarm bells should be ringing for our society broadly if we're failing to connect relationally because we've isolated ourselves, not only sexually but in many other ways. I guess that's great for job security for us, but it's a terrible place to live if I'm having to I can't therapize myself out of a job and connect people anymore. I don't want to live in that society. Are you seeing this happen more frequently, more intensely, younger? I mean, what's the trend? Is there one? Can we tell?
I don't know, because I don't want to sound like this is all, a doomsday projection. I just think it's changing. We are changing rapidly. And I don't know what this is going to bring. I think there's going to be some sort of backlash where people get sick of the loneliness of electronic, dating and sex, and really want to have a connection with someone else. And oftentimes when people come into treatment for sexual issues where they've been really, kind of players or sexually compulsive or isolated looking at porn only, they come in because they're lonely. And they want to connect with someone, but they don't know how. And they know that what they're doing is they can't stop doing what they're doing. And for a lot of people, it's about putting their electronics down.
Yeah.
Even in a relationship. I saw something online briefly yesterday. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but apparently a photographer has done a whole book of photographs of people with electronics in their hands, but he's erased the phone. So there was one stunning photo of a couple in bed, back to back, and they're looking into their phones, and they're holding it with their hands, but the phones are not actually in their hands, but their hands are posed a particular way. And I thought, wow, if we could see ourselves walking around with these phones at restaurants, down the street, in bed with each other, we would start to see how disconnected we are and how much novelty-seeking creatures we are, because the computer in our hand, the phone, offers us novelty to the second, down to the second we can get the latest and greatest. And so how does that erode what we were talking about to begin with, which are these deeper conversations between couples that have been together for a long time? Because there is a taken for grantedness that sets in, and we don't make time for each other, but we will for a football game on the weekend, or to go be with friends, or do something with the kids, or clean out a closet. But really sitting down with each other is challenging. And we have a million distractions to help us out with those challenges.
Is there a lack of commitment or hard work or, effort avoidance? Is that what's going on with the overarching instant gratification culture? Everything's easier now, and it's easier just to punch out. Right, it's easier just to stay in surface level content, watch the football game rather than sit on the couch and have the conversation. I'm just thinking out loud here because I really don't have an answer. It seems like that may be the reason, and maybe people have just been so habit formed by, again, the dopamine reinforcement, that instead of maybe in yesteryear we would have that empty silence in the home and we'd be forced to talk to each other. Now we can just pick up a device because it's easier, and that leads to other easier things like cleaning the closet or throwing on the TV. We've had TVs for several generations now. That's not a big deal, but maybe it's happening more frequently because we've conditioned ourselves to bail out easier. I don't know.
Sure, and look, we live in a super busy world, so it's easier for parents if their kids are preoccupied with something else than to tend to them the way previous generations did. I think stay-at-home moms is like a 10 to 13% now, where one person works and the other person stays at home and raises kids.
That's wild.
So it is easier, and I think human beings are more motivated to get out of pain than to move towards pleasurable states.
Yeah, I think
So
that's probably
I
reasonable
think if
too.
my marriage is in trouble, I'll go get help because it's painful. But if my marriage is fine, I'm not going to go to a therapist to say, hey, how can this be better? What am I missing?
Hmm. And that's the second time that's come up this conversation. So we
Right.
should
And
probably
those
highlight that.
couples, by the way, don't necessarily need to be in weekly couples therapy forever. Maybe they go weekly, for a month or two, and then they decide they're going to check in every other week or once a month. But they have an anchor. They have a place to go to stay current so that resentments don't build up. And when resentments build up, a sexual desire tanks.
If there are young clinicians listening to this, I want you to rewind that right there and think about your treatment planning in that context. We don't need to have people languishing in service weekly in perpetuity. Definitely
Yeah.
not just to keep our calendars full. Do not do that. But
Right.
out of honoring the person's own progress, we really need to be moving them forward and encouraging them that maintenance can be every couple of months. And we need to encourage people to come in when things are going well.
Right. So they can also hear themselves talk about how well they're doing. And the therapist can highlight things like, oh my gosh, you guys are juggling a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing and impressive how you keep your emotional connection going. And a sexual connection is a positive emotional connection because when you two are in harmony, that means your children are in harmony. That means work is more in harmony. The whole system is healthier when the parents are connected, and being connected is part of it is being sexual with each other.
I need to start recording this on video because if we had this on video, you could see me high-fiving myself over the like clapping and like fist pumping. As the parents go, so goes the household. You're the
Correct.
executives of your home. If you're happy and harmonious and you love each other and you demonstrate that openly and you're consistent and your children see that, they will also be that way. So I've said it repeatedly, we don't do fix my kid. We involve the parents, but oftentimes I think we have to, almost say, hey, we'll get to your kid in a minute, but the next few sessions, we really need to work on you guys.
That's right. Right, because your child's a reflection of what's going on in the system. Most likely that's what's going on. And that's not to be parent blaming.
Not at all.
It's just that, children reflect what's going on in their environment. They're sponges.
Yeah, well, and the parents are the authority figures, so who else are they going to listen to? And if the parents are absent, then you really need to answer that question. Who else are they listening to?
Well, then they're listening to the internet, their peers.
Uh-huh, yeah. So
we know where that goes.
Do you work with children?
I don't. My career has really been built on working with adults. So I'm not an expert in children. I am very interested in, early attachment processes and developmental neuroscience, but only in so much as how the brain and body get set up early on and how that can put someone on the trajectory for major mental illness and addiction.
You have a book about that, don't you? Exclusively?
Well, it's a chapter in a book.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay. Maybe that's it. Talk a little bit more about that, because that's fascinating to me, please.
Well, what we know from developmental neuroscience is that, the infant brain and body are setting up in the third trimester of pregnancy. And so the mother or the surrogate or the person carrying the infant is directly in communication with that infant through a neurochemical subjectivity, meaning if the mother is upset or anxious or traumatized, her body's going to release a whole host of stress chemicals, and those chemicals are going to go through the placenta, and they will be encoding the infant's brain and body also. We certainly know that women that use drugs give birth to babies that are addicted to drugs. And so it doesn't have to be an outside source. It can be high levels of adrenaline, cortisol, stress hormones that are impacting that nervous system also. And then once the infant is born, many people talk about the first, several months as an out-of-body pregnancy because the infant is still so nascent. And it's absolutely dependent on experience of the major caregivers and its environment in order for its brain and body to grow appropriately. So if you have a child that is neglected, as was the case of the Romanian orphans in the 90s, when they were just left in cribs and not tended to at all, you get blighted brains. They don't develop appropriately. But when you have a parent that's contingently responding, making eye contact, their tone of voice, their facial expressions, gesture, touch, all of that is growing the right brain specifically, and the nervous system. And the child is having the experience of being soothed when upset appropriately. So if the baby cries because it's hungry or its diaper's wet, the parent responds in an appropriate amount of time and, it soothes that source of upset so that the nervous system is, responding because there's a source of aggravation or danger, and it's being responded to by soothing it down. So it builds capacity for the vicissitudes of life, for hurt, upset, that it can handle it over time because there's a parent there that's been regulating it over time. Until you've got a securely attached child. But when there's any kind of upset to that that's chronic, whether it's, anxiety, depression, anger in the household, alcoholism, mental illness, as I mentioned before, that child's brain and body is not going to set up optimally. And then you're going to have problems sometimes over a lifetime.
Can it be corrected later on down the road?
Some of it can, and some of it can't. It just depends on how extreme it is.
We've heard.
Because
go ahead.
certain structures in the brain, that if they are blighted or they don't grow, they're not going to grow back. Certain axons. We have dendritic growth, we know, for a lifetime. We have something called neuroplasticity and also autonomic plasticity. The body can also tolerate more too. So we can learn these things, and we can grow some capacities, but we may never be 100% optimally if there were gross or egregious problems that intercepted those growth patterns early on.
When you were talking about the in utero exposure to high levels of stress hormones, I was thinking of couples in domestic violence relationships.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of that through our agency. We have a partnership with one of our local agencies here that does sexual and domestic violence advocacy and shelter and whatnot. And I'm thinking about people in pregnancy, and then I'm thinking about those little babies, and then I'm thinking about, what if you were one of those little babies who was exposed to that many, many years ago, but now you're a fully functioning adult? And I'll put an asterisk on fully functioning because we're not really sure. And you're listening to this podcast and you go, well, I grew up in that environment. Am I doomed? And I'm hearing about neuroplasticity. I'm hearing about dendritic growth. But can you get a little more specific maybe with people who may be listening to this, or maybe clinicians who work with that population, that demographic? What can we do specifically to help grow that resiliency, that distress tolerance, maybe rewire those pathways?
Well, I think that happens in long-term relational psychotherapy. And that's what the data show also. It's the close-in, week-in and week-out experience with another person who is regulating, who really sees you, hears you, who challenges you, when your relational patterns are distorted, especially if you get angry or you're dismissive of the therapist, that the therapist really gets into a relationship with the client, not in an old-fashioned, symbolic way, but in a real relational way where you're impacting me and I'm impacting you, and we talk about it quite explicitly, and the therapist knows how to regulate that client appropriately. And so it's about building a long-term relationship, because when that happens, there is a subcortical right brain to right brain read that's going on, brainstem to brainstem, where the client who grew up with abuse is now in the presence of a safe other. And so previous circuits maybe that were down, or previous areas that didn't develop as well as they could have, start to come online in the face of that safety. But the therapy has to be safe, but not too safe. There have to be enough challenges at the person's capacities to help them shift and grow. So you might not always like your therapist. You might be angry at him or her, but can you work it through with them? Can you come to a resolution where you both feel good about it? And not only good about it, but closer afterwards. That starts to change things profoundly. But, it doesn't take as long as it took. Like if you grew up in an abusive